Hey everyone, what we're looking at tonight is my own rendition of a Smith & Wesson 38 Special. Smith & Wesson first introduced the 38 Special in 1898, and it was an improvement of a 38 Long Colt. This particular model is a 1902 military and police second model, which is part of the K-frame revolvers, which Smith & Wesson has a whole line of revolvers for. The Smith & Wesson 38 Special is often used for target shooting and competition shooting, for self-defense, and it's typically recommended for women because of its size, its accuracy, and its recoil. It's somewhat manageable. So tonight we're going to focus particularly on the mechanism parts. So there's four main components to the 38 Special kind of trigger mechanism. We have the hammer, which is the large piece in the top, the sear, which is the orange piece here in the middle, the hand, which is the purple piece here that rotates the cylinder, and the trigger. I'm going to demonstrate the double action. So it sits here on just normal, and for double action the hammer is pulled back. The sear is right above the trigger mechanism and the hammer, and it gets pushed up by the trigger until it's released here. That sets this free, that sets the hammer free to hit the firing pin. So then on its return, trigger hits back the sear until it kind of flies by it and returns back to its normal position. And that is just the same mechanism that goes on for the double action. Pushes it up, the hammer is released, trigger is pulled back, hammer hits the firing pin, and that is for a double action. So I'm going to demonstrate single action for the 38 Special. In single action, if the pieces were perfect, as in metal and in a gun, there wouldn't need to be any use of the trigger, but for my demonstration I will have to be using the trigger. So in single action, the hammer would be pulled back until the hammer and the trigger kind of fall into this small niche in between here. Then when the trigger is pulled, the hammer is releasing to the firing pin. So we'll do that again, but it's just that the trigger's here, hammer's pulled back all the way till this lines up, that tiny little piece of trigger and hammer line up on that ledge. Trigger is pulled back, releasing the hammer, hitting the firing pin and causing the action. Now we're going to see a short demonstration done by Ben Nicholson on his 38 Special of his own collection to see how the actual pieces work together to create this function. Thank you very much.
They do work together. All right, so they are linked by what is known as the sear. That's this piece of metal right here. So the trigger has a spur right there that pushes against the sear, which is right here. This axle you see is rotating. It goes up, and then at this point, that little lug there no longer touches the sear, and there's a second piece of metal that pushes against the base of the hammer, and then it flicks back like that and slips off the shelf.
Try doing it in single action.
Double action. Now let's look at single action. Single action, instead of using the trigger to move everything, you use the hammer to move everything. So you don't even need your finger in the trigger. So you pull it back, and then something pretty wonderful happens. There's a little tiny notch in this projection
Do
here.
that again so I can just get a close up.
Sure. There's a little tiny notch right here. You can see it maybe.
Yeah, yeah.
Right there, a little tiny notch. So it goes up, and then it catches in that little notch there. You can just see it. You pull the trigger, and it just microscopically gets out of the way, and the hammer drops. So we'll do that again. Single action. Up, and you can hear it click. Listen. Right there, that lug, which is part of the trigger, sits into that notch. Then
locks the hammer back.
Locks the hammer back, and then you can just use very little force right here to push that, just a tiny amount, and it gets out of the way, and then the hammer drops.